All right, 6 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order. Please stand and say the pledge of allegiance.
One nation under God, justice.
Roll call, please.
Tom Roderick.
Here.
Evan George.
Here.
Darlene Hooper. Here. Sarah Coleman. Heather Reynolds.
Here.
Sue Russell. Deb Swampman. Here.
Any attendees that haven't, please sign in when you get a chance. And we're going to take a quick executive session to start. We anticipate it'll be around 15 minutes. We anticipate entering into executive session to discuss the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or persons. Can I have a motion?
A motion.
And a second? Thanks, Tom. Deb? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions, exceptions. Passes, did we have it? Passes. That was quicker than 15.
I have that. Okay.
Motion to return to regular session at 6:11. Tom, in a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Carry on. Going to our personnel consent agenda A, could I have a motion?
A motion.
Thank you, Deb, in a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Evan. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion passes. And we're looking at our budget discussion.
All right, so. Okay, so I did ask Hayden to present this with me, as he has been working hard on preparing budget. You can come up here, say whatever. So just as a reminder, January we saw the executive budget, March we saw the legislative budget, and we're hoping for an on-time budget of April 1st, but I always feel like this time of year, we start getting rumblings like it might not be an on-time budget. So we'll certainly wait and see how that plays out. We're gonna walk through the admin, the program, and the capital budget, and I will let Hayden talk this through.
Yeah, so the first thing I kind of want to point out is when we're looking at these negatives, they may not necessarily mean a reduction in costs, but could potentially mean a recode. So when I go into my budget season, I look at all the different factors and I look at, okay, something like Rural Schools Association fee. Well, is it billed to the Board of Education? Is it billed to the superintendent who uses it more? So those are different things why we might have a quick recode. So for example, we might see like a $17,000 increase somewhere, but a $17,000 decrease in another area. And it's really just those quick flips. On the administrative side though, nothing super surprising. We do include all the employee benefits in here. So this year we did see we'll say on average a 4.5% increase on health insurance rates. But that depended on Plan 1. So Plan 1 family individual plans to see a 9% increase this year. Luckily, we do not have any active employees enrolled in those plans. Plan 1 is being phased out. We do have Plan 1 retirees who are enrolled in Medicare primary plans. Plan 2 So about 4.5% to 5% increase depending on the plan in there. So that's really where you're seeing that driving employee benefits going up. Same thing across the board here. A lot of these are either salary driven or just general increases. We around this time of year start getting quotes in from everything, all of the different association dues, all of our just general things that we're always buying, different quotes for equipment, things like that. So that's where all of those increases are driven from. But on this one, definitely nothing surprising. We will go over the admin and capital policies budget after. That is our, that'll be voted on April 29th.
Sounds right, April 29th.
I should know, I work there. So it's somewhere April 20th, April 29th, I believe though. I'm gonna go to the next one. So program, so this is everything that we think of when we're thinking exactly student interaction with our teachers and students. So we run all of the instruction through here. We see a decrease right away. That is really driven by BOCE's code. So a lot of times we look at curriculum development and conferences for staff to go to. So I did kind of move some things around looking at who's attending those conferences. So if it's a professional development for the board, if it's professional development for clerical staff or development for transportation staff, I did kind of separate some of those things out just so we could get a real picture of what our teachers are actually doing. Special education, very minimal increase. We did not. This is really driven by BOCE's costs out of district placements for students, or if we had students in residential placements, that's really what's going in that special ed line. Not a big increase. We did not see massive increases from BOCE's tuition, BOCE services. So nothing surprising there. Occupational education, that is typically strictly CV Tech, but we also run incarcerated youth programs out of that as well. So that's really where that decrease is being driven from, is those costs. CV Tech is on a 5-year rolling average. So that's why that rate is always going to be different. Even if the tuition changes and the tuition goes up, we might have lower enrollment based on that 5-year average. So that line is constantly up and down for a lot of districts. Library, media, special schools. So that is going to be anything with library. If we had like a videography class, those types of things all run through this line. Minor increases really driven by subscription costs. So the software used for library loans and giving books out. So we see a pretty big increase there this year. And then as well as other just softwares that we use day in and day out. Computer assisted instruction, again, we're seeing a decrease. This is, I hate to say, but driven by BOCE's. We're seeing reduction in some costs, not a lot. But this is an area where we're going to buy a lot of our Chromebooks. We're going to buy Frontline for IEP and 504 plans, Frontline for, what's it called? Staff attendance, our Wi-Fi, all of those different bills are going to run right through there. Guidance, health, psychology, co-curricular, your clubs, our school psychologists are both in here. So minor decrease, but that's just due to some contractual obligations with different, again, softwares and things like that. So I really try and make sure that if it's a software that only the nurse uses, making sure that it's for there coded with that nurse. Interscholastic sports, so everything from officials, coaching salaries, our equipment, our uniforms, everything like that is going to run right through there. So we do minor increases really just due to, again, contractual salaries. Every year those salaries go up for coaches, different things like that. Transportation is like the big one. It's like, well, what's happening there? You remember we are looking at purchasing additional buses this year. So that goes right in that line and takes care of about 95% of that increase is just due to those bus purchases this year. But anything transportation, sub bus drivers, regular salaries for bus drivers, things like that. And then our central storeroom is, there's a couple salaries in there, but it's really driving all the different regular ed school supplies. So your printer, ink, pencils, pens, all of that stuff flows through that line. I typically think of the central storeroom as the catch-all. If we are going to use it and we don't quite know where it goes, we put it in the central storeroom, but it's always typically a consumable item that we use year over year. Yeah.
So some of these costs are coming out of capital.
Right here, this transportation here.
Transportation, and are any of the other categories full of capital?
Not on this slide, on the next slide. If you remember from the last board meeting, we talked about a tractor, a truck.
Yeah.
Those things, yes, we do drive them, but they're not transportation. They fall under facilities and plants. So transportation is anything that transports students.
Yeah.
And that is an aidable line, so we have to be really careful of what we put there, making sure that it's benefiting students and transportation of those students. If we go on again. Capital. So operation, maintenance of plant, smaller increases, but again, if I took out those tractors, and the plow truck that we do need to purchase, those are very minimal increases. We're just looking at things like electricity, all of our actual utilities. I will say we are looking very, very carefully at things like electricity, water, sewer right now. Last month, I did look at our January 2024 electricity bill versus our January 2025 electricity bill. It was $12,000 different. It had gone up that much in 1 year. So that is another driving factor that is we have to be very careful. We use 3 different electricity providers. We use National Grid, NYSEG, depending on which building you're at. And then we also use SMEC, which is the School Municipal Energy Cooperative. So it's a collection of schools that runs through Erie One BOCES. And they kind of take all of our bills from National Grid, NYSEG, and they disperse it out. So it's a cooperative purchasing program, which saves us a lot of money. Refunded property tax, we get these every year. Typically right about now is when the courts are settling a lot of those judgments. So we get those property tax refunds, people who win their case to lower their assessments. That does happen quite often. And then the interfund transfers, mainly driven by 2 interfund transfers. We transfer money to the cafeteria to cover any deficits that they may be facing. And then we also transfer money to the special aid fund every year. Special aid fund, what we're transferring there is to cover summer special education costs at BOCES. And then cafeteria is just general operating costs. And then finally, debt service. That is something that you will see year over year start to decrease unless we were to take on another capital project that would see an increase. The debt service ties directly into our tax cap though. So anything that you see here is an additional item on that tax cap that gets factored in. But that is just existing debt from mainly the pre-merger time. So Elizabethtown Lewis is still paying off. Elizabethtown Lewis is still paying off a capital project from years ago. Westport has 1 remaining as well. And then if they had any debt on buses before, things like that, we assumed all of that debt.
Question?
Yeah.
Going back to transportation, those are propositional items,
Correct.
and so same with the truck
Correct.
and the traffic.
Yep.
What happens if part goes through and other part does not go through? Get excessive money or,
They have to be removed.
pardon?
They would have to be removed so that
Okay, so
they're voted on separately.
Okay.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be any excess of money, however, because that money's currently in a reserve. So we just wouldn't pull the money out of the
Right,
reserve.
we see what
Yeah,
that-
it's not like the money would just in the general.
So with that, we're coming out 25-26 current budget. We're looking at 16.4 million. That will change, could change. We still do not have final aid numbers from the state. Like Dr. Meyer had mentioned before, April 1st is the state deadline. Last year was April 3rd. Work sessions are currently scheduled through April 9th right now. So it could be tomorrow or it could be well in the future. Hoping sooner rather than later because I believe the board here adopts the budget on April 10th. So I could potentially have 12 hours to finalize the budget, depending on when the state comes out. But that's currently where we stand. And again, well, $513,000 of that is driven from those bus purchases and the other equipment needs coming right out of the reserve. So 5.24% increase is actually a 1.95% increase if we remove those purchases.
Sorry, I didn't mean to advance that, but that is exactly what Hayden is saying right here. So if you look at that, so the 5.2% on this top line, that's still the 3.08% tax levy increase. But down here, that asterisk is showing you that if you were to remove all the transportation, the truck and the tractor, it would only be a 1.9% increase. So, and again, we're doing some of these transportation purchases now as we're planning for the shift to electric buses. We're trying to get some of these purchases in while we still can, while we're waiting to see what the state does with that. So if you take a look at our history, you can see we've had some pretty small budget increases over the years. You know, been as high as 2.9%, but you know, our transportation purchases are a little more this year than we've seen previously. Then you look at the tax levy increase, 3.08. That kind of falls in line with where we've been. We've been as high as 4.15. We've been as low as 0.98. So 3.08 is, you know, kind of falls in that range where we've been before. No real update. This is really just same thing as the last meeting. Tax cap. That's what the increase looks like. The tax levy is, you know, 8.5 million. And again, just comparative to the region, looking at anywhere from 1.1% to a 9.8%. We're still, two districts are still considering exceeding the cap, just for your awareness. And if you take a look at what does this mean for our taxpayers, if you look here, if you remember, those of you that have seen the budget presentation before, we have our different towns here: Chesterfield, Elizabethtown, Essex, Lewis, Mariah, and Westport. Are the towns that are in the districts. For example, Mariah, we just have a handful of parcels in Mariah, a few more in Essex, and just a couple in Chesterfield. But, you know, the majority of our property is in Westport, Lewis, and Elizabethtown. If I can draw your attention to this column here, the equalization rate column. This is based on the assessments, how recently the assessments were. And if you look at Westport and Lewis, which is why they're highlighted, they are at 100% equalization rate, okay? Because they're at 100% equalization rate, they're going to have the lowest tax rate per thousand. If you go all the way over, you can see that's just over $11, 11.006. So that would be, you know, roughly $11 per thousand. So if you had you know, $100,000 house, it would be $1,100. The math makes sense to that. I'm fine right there. But if you look at some of the other towns where the rate is less than 100, start with Essex, for example, is the next highest at 93.6%. They would be paying $11.74 per thousand. Then you look at Chesterfield, we'd be paying $13.10 per thousand. Elizabethtown would be paying $13.94 per thousand, and the Mariah $16.18 per thousand. So I often get the question of why the discrepancy. It's because of the equalization rate. The way that gets changed is really for these towns to do another assessment and to presumably increase the valuation of the properties. Anything else?
No, I think I put this slide up at a different budget presentation recently, and I got the wide eyes of a lot of numbers. What does it mean? So when we look at the assessed value, this is the number that changes every year. I will tell you, it never goes down. I think all of us who are homeowners can feel that our assessed value never goes down. That equalization rate, just said, he had explained, a lot of times the way that the state looks at it is market value versus assessed value. So in these two towns, what they're saying is if a house went on the market, what it's going to sell for is roughly what it's assessed at. If it's lower, it means that you are typically selling your house for more than it is assessed at, which is why it computes these numbers, and you see that their assessed value is lower than their full valuation. So they're saying that this is actually what those properties are worth if they were to sell on the open market. This is just a calculation that we do every year to talk about the share of the taxes that they pay. So if we have one pot of money and we have this many parcels in this town, this many in this town, we compute a percentage of how much they share of the total tax dollars that they have to pay, which then takes this percentage, multiplies it by our total levy, and gives me this number. So then that give this to the counties, well, in this case, the one county, and they generate the tax bills and show us this is what everyone's gonna pay. So they will take that 18, Chesterfield really is that low. So that $18,000 that the residents of Chesterfield pay, and then they split it up based on those assessed values of those homes, multiply it by that number, there's your tax bill. It's a very, very complex one, and I usually sit down for about a week every August and shut my door and have to calculate all that out multiple times. And then the county is fantastic because you send it to them and 2 seconds later, they tell you you're wrong and you get to fix it. But they take care of everything for us. And then the state gets involved on those equalization rates.
So how does that compare? So, yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just had a question. What is our current fund balance, and is that applied to the next year's budget needs?
So we haven't, we have not needed to use our fund balance to offset the budget since we merged. That was used, I know in Westport for a very long time prior to the merger. I don't know, couldn't tell you going back how far, but for at least 5 to 10 years. And I know in the budgets I saw for Elizabeth Lewis, at least for a handful of years before the fund balance was used. So that has definitely been one of the advantages of merging, that we've not had to use any of our fund balance to help offset the budget. I can tell you that I believe that every other school district in the region is using at least some part of their fund balance to offset their budget. And this is going to be the 7th budget that we've done. We have not had to do that. So that's pretty great.
So what happens to that money then?
It's just in the fund balance.
It accrues interest, and it'll
Okay.
keep building. So really what it's
Is it
there as a safety measure. It's there as a safety measure. So if we hit an economic time like 2008, and all of a sudden our state aid plummets or something happens, they redo the foundation aid formula and we get hit. It's there as that safety mechanism.
Okay.
So that's the number that they want you to be under 4%, right? That's also the number that most small districts are usually closer to like the 8 to 10% range. When we get over that 8 to 10% range, that's when we will put it in reserves usually. But yeah, we haven't had to use that, which has been I think a huge plus for us. Okay, so yeah, go ahead. I'll let you.
So on this one, we just take, that big long formula that we just showed to calculate the tax rates, we do it for every single district, find out where everyone stands. Obviously, Boquet, typically always middle of the pack. When we do that this year, though, this is based on 24-25 tax rates. Boquet is definitely on the lower end. We see just these 4 districts or 5 districts that are below Boquet Valley for the actual tax rate. So we do range pretty drastically. You see if a district has a much higher assessed value, their tax rate is significantly lower. So one of the highest tax assessed values in our region is Scroon Lake, with all of their property value there. So you see their tax rate significantly lower. I say that, but at the same time, Plattsburgh has the highest assessed value, but they also have the highest tax rate. But that's typically what we see. The higher the assessed value, the lower the tax rate. And then these numbers will change next year when we get new assessed values and we put in the new budget. You'll see them kind of, most of them will stay pretty even, but districts that exceed the tax cap, you'll see them go up pretty significantly.
And this 1155, you'll notice that 1155 is not on this sheet anywhere. It's an average of those numbers, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this one, obviously, we had mentioned a couple times about the incentive aid that start going down due to the merger. Tax levy increase, we've gone through kind of how those are calculated. I did want to point out with ERS, TRS, those are not just numbers that we make up, they are an actual calculation. So ERS is really driven by those tiers right now. And each individual district is completely different. So the more tier 3 members that you have working in your district, the more the district pays, because those employees do not contribute to the retirement system. Whereas if you look at a tier 6 member who is contributing between, I think the lowest is 3% and the highest is 6% of a salary, that's offsetting our costs. So it's a cost sharing. So I do predict we will start to see ERS slowly decline because those tier 3 members are getting to retirement age. If that waiver continues though, that's another piece, as we still technically pay a small portion of those employees. TRS is a rate that's given to us every year from TRS. So typically beginning of March, end of February, we get a letter from TRS saying, this is your percentage. It applies to every single school district in the state. And then middle of June, we get the final, and that gives us our final. So we just budget based on what they provide to us. And then it'll change. Usually it's a very small amount that it'll change, and just adjust the budget after that.
And just as a reminder, TRS, that's the teacher retirement, and ERS, that's the employee retirement, so not folks. And our 4 propositions that we're looking at, budget to go out at the tax cap. The Board of Education member elections would be the second proposition. Third proposition would be the bus purchases out of the reserves. And as a reminder, when it comes from the reserve, there's no additional tax increase for the taxpayer. That money's already in the reserve. We just pull it out of the reserve. And same thing for Proposition 4 for the truck, van, and the tractor purchase. That's also coming out of that transportation and maintenance reserve. So same as the buses, no additional tax implications for our taxpayers. And our upcoming budget meetings, we'll get updates on all the things that you've seen. If any of the numbers change, we certainly report those to you. And questions?
Do you know how much is in our reserve for the transportation maintenance?
About $860,000. That is a very, I know it's in the $800,000 range. But we also have the capital reserve, which has significant.
So does this budget have any impact on programs, or are they going to be remaining the same?
Program should stay the same. Yeah, no real change from program.
Okay, so increase is basically due to your health insurance and salaries and
Yeah.
heating.
Yeah, and
Cost of living.
yep.
I'm curious, it said $12,000 difference in electrical. What is our average bill?
People in Elizabethtown have said that their
Yeah.
electric bills have gone up astronomically.
It's funny, I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I do know, so I also oversee Spring Lake. We have the same thing. They are typically $5,000 more than Spring Lake, so about $25,000 per month between the 3 buildings.
We're also looking at, actually tomorrow, I meet with the company, Stay Automation. We're talking about an energy performance contract, which basically the idea is that they are looking at ways to reduce the energy consumption, and they need to demonstrate, and you can correct me on this, but I think, is it over 10 years, 15 years, 10?
I believe it's just negotiable.
Yeah, okay. So over a certain number of years, there's if you do X amount of work, you will see a return on that in 10 years or whatever number of years. So that means tomorrow, and talk about what, if there's a project that we can look at, that makes sense.
We did look at too, we recently just got a rebate through NICEAG for LED light bulbs that I just finalized. So there was an additional incentive to switch over to those, which should help as well.
Other question? Okay, thank you, Hayden.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. So we're keeping our next meeting Thursday, April 10th, 6 p.m. at Lakeland campus. And I just want to add an executive session to our agenda. The second one, we're going to enter executive session for number 6 again to discuss the medical, financial, and credit or employment history of particular person or persons. Can I get a motion?
I'm good.
In a second?
Second.
Thank you. And discussion, we don't anticipate any action coming from that. You're free to stay or go home. So all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? This passes.